Today, we're talking with Ali Bonar, the founder and CEO of Oat Haus, which is the brand that created an entirely new category, which is granola butter. What started as a personal health journey became the foundation for a fast growing company now sold in thousands of stores across the country, including Whole Foods, Sprouts, Target, and Costco. Along the way, Ali landed a pitch on Shark Tank. She didn't end up taking the deal, but the exposure brought in a wave of new customers and validated something she already believed, which is a strong brand with a loyal community can be more powerful than just a check. In this episode, we'll explore how Ali turned a homemade oat spread into a nationally distributed brand and why founder led storytelling remains one of the biggest advantages. Ali, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me on the brand study.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm really excited for this episode too. And before we kick off, I would love to just hear a little bit about the product and what Oat Haus sells.
What is granola butter? It's a crazy idea that people, for some reason, understood immediately. So it's the world's first oat-based spread, and it's nut-free, gluten-free, vegan, and it's made from oats. So essentially, we just bake granola and blend it up into a yummy spread. We have tons of different flavors: cookie dough, brownie batter, birthday cake, and we started 7 years ago. And now, as you mentioned, we just launched Costco as our newest retailer.
I was actually introduced to granola butter at Expo West when I found your booth. And I think it's so cool. And I would love to hear a little bit about the inspiration because there's a lot of nut butters out there. So why granola butter?
Yes, I know. Not another butter. I always have to preface like we are different, don't worry. Because there are a lot of butters now. And what started with peanut butter has now, walnut butter and now we're the oat butter. But, the idea really did come from a place of need. So I struggled with an eating disorder for over a decade, which I'm super open about. And I think in my recovery, I really started to reintroduce a lot of my fear foods back into my diet. So I had restricted peanut butter, almond butter for years. And as I reintroduced them, I just had a hard time digesting nuts. So I actually don't have a nut allergy, but at that time, I just needed something nut free. And the only options on the market that were nut free were, sunflower seed butter, soy nut butter. And if you've ever tried those, a lot of people know they're not the best tasting. So I selfishly was like, okay, I'm going to create something just in my kitchen for myself to throw on a banana before a workout. And I just had this epiphany to do an oat based spread. And I think it really came from, it was 2016, 2017, right when oat milk was popping up everywhere. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, if you could create a milk out of oats, you could probably create a spread out of oats. And that's where the initial idea came from. And obviously, raw oats as a spread would be terrible and dry and very mealy. And so had the idea to toast the oats first, which is where the idea for calling it granola butter came from. We actually thought about oat butter, which we can talk about later. We almost rebranded and changed our product name to oat butter, but ultimately kept it granola butter just because it sounds more delicious. And people thought oat butter maybe sounded a little dry.
And trying it, it actually was so delicious. It has that deep, rich taste of granola and all the complexities that come with granola, but in that smooth consistency of a nut butter, which, I mean, it was kind of a mind blown moment. And so making this in your kitchen, I could imagine it started out really scrappy. I'd love to hear a little bit about the early days of how Oat Haus came to be.
Yes, very scrappy. So at the time, so I was living in San Francisco at the time and was working in tech, very cliche of me. But I wasn't even working in food. I was working for a health tech startup at the time, which is now much bigger than a startup. It was a company called Doximity. They IPO'd a couple of years ago, but I was working for them when they were small. And, there was probably 50 people working for them at the time. And we were a really tight knit team. And the reason that I mention this is because I had just started to share on my personal Instagram, like some recipes and food stuff. And so it was very early on in the world of influencing, but I was starting to get sent some free product by, some of the bigger brands. And I was like, I didn't even know you could monetize on social media. I was like, I've made it. Like, this is amazing. I got some Siete chips. Like, I am a celebrity. And so my coworkers at Doximity were used to me just like bringing in, snacks for them all the time and free product because they would send me like boxes of stuff that I could never finish. I was living by myself. And so when we first started, the idea for granola butter, we were in the early days of just like iterating recipes and throwing stuff into a Vitamix blender, Trader Joe's granola, like trying all different variations. And so, in order to get true, unbiased customer feedback, the best solution that I thought of was to bring this unlabeled, weird, creepy jar into the ducks in the office and pass it around and get feedback from my coworkers. And I told them, hey, this big company who I can't tell you, it's a secret, they sent me their new beta product and they're looking for feedback. So people were savage and they were like, this tastes like wet sand, you know, inedible. This is a choking hazard. So yes, very scrappy in the early days. I remember driving around the hills of San Francisco in my little red VW convertible bug and just like calling my friends and being like, come outside. And then I would throw them a jar and then I'd be like, call me in a week and tell me what you think. And it was a lot of customer feedback, or I guess like friend feedback, not really customers at that point. So hundreds and hundreds of iterations. And we actually started, our first recipe had flax in it, it had collagen in it. We were much more of a functional spread in the beginning because, we were trying to compete with nut butter and oats obviously don't have much protein. So we were like, okay, let's throw some collagen protein in there. And over time, we actually have iterated more towards like a decadent dessert like spread, which is what you try to Expo West. And we just heard that from customers. It's made with better for you ingredients. So gluten-free oats, olive oil, maple syrup, but people really eat our product because it tastes good. And, they don't eat it because it has collagen in it. They don't eat it because it has flax in it. And so I think over years, we just learned from customers what they were really looking for. But other things, in the early days that were very scrappy. So, we self-manufactured, as I mentioned, in a Vitamix blender, and we actually made our product in a Vitamix blender for the first year and a half. And so we had, a whole table when we ultimately got to like a commissary kitchen in San Diego, which we can talk about. But we had probably like 7 or 8 Vitamix blenders lined up, and we would just go down the row and like stir them every once in a while and like scrape down the sides. And so I remember Eric, my soon to be husband and co-founder, he would just sleep with these wrist guards on while we're just stirring so many Vitamixes. And what's hilarious is we're now in Cleveland with our new facility, and Vitamix is headquartered in Cleveland. So I met them for coffee like a couple months ago, and I was like, you guys have no idea. You actually were so fundamental to our early days. But yes, it was very, very scrappy.
I love hearing those early stories. And as a consumer, when you see a product in Costco, you're like, wow, they're killing it. They're in Costco. And to hear how it all started, just so inspiring that really, if you have an amazing idea and the grit and determination to go out and do it, you really never know where a project will lead you. And I love how you also validated, as I've done these podcasts, that really is a common theme of validating with friends and family or at farmers markets, and then really rapidly iterate based on that feedback rather than just assuming that the first try is going to be the right try. That's so cool. So was it just you and Eric at the start of it?
So yes. So I thought of the idea initially. Eric was working for Accenture Consulting at the time, also living in San Francisco. And him and I actually, we went to Berkeley together. So we met in undergrad, and we've always both been like very entrepreneurial. But, when you're fresh out of college, you're just focused on financial stability and like getting a job. You're like, if anyone will hire me, I'll take it. So we didn't want to like jump right into entrepreneurship, but we always just had that pull. We actually had a bunch of ideas before this. One of the ideas we had was we really wanted to do like a smart tampon, kind of like a tampon that you can connect Bluetooth to your phone and it will let you know when it's time to change it, and you could have like absorbency sensors in it and everything. But we didn't really want to get into like that digital health, also like having Bluetooth up in your body, it's like lots of liability. So we actually found another group at Berkeley that was already working on it for the past few years. So we're like, all right, we're going to let them take it and run with it. But that was one idea we had. And, we just always were bouncing ideas off each other. And then, when I thought of this one, he was over at my house and I just said it offhandedly, kind of like, this is a silly idea. And he was like, wait, no, this is actually genius. Like, how has no one created an oat-based spread before? And we were just seeing how oat milk was popping off. And we're like, this is actually so smart because a lot of the schools, but a lot of the schools are nut-free. And so I didn't realize that, but starting to talk to some of, friends of friends that had kids, they were like, our kids won't eat these nut-free spreads and they can't bring PB&Js to school, which is what I grew up on. And so it wasn't just a cool idea, but it was also blended with a huge white space and a huge need for, not only people that have allergies, but also all of these parents of kids that don't have allergies, but the schools are preventing them from bringing nuts into the school system. So it was very serendipitous, but we had a vacation planned to Paris. We had never been to Paris before. It sounds very bougie, but we used his Accenture credit card points, and we go to Paris, and we're just like lit up by this idea. We're just talking about it over dinner. We like can't shut up about this idea. And the first few iterations, as I mentioned, wet sand, choking hazard, not sellable. I think one of my coworkers had said, you couldn't pay me to eat this. And so we're in Paris. We're like, who could help us like bring this idea to life? Who's in the culinary space? And that's when, a flip, switched in Eric's brain of like, oh my gosh, my friend Ari, he's a chef and he's actually just opened a restaurant in Paris. And him and I went to Jewish summer camp together, and like, this is perfect. And all true, friendships form at Jewish summer camp. So we like hit up Ari and we, grab a bottle of wine. We're sitting by the river. He like has a cigarette and like guitar. It's like very French. And we're just like pitching him on this idea. And he is so burned out on the fine dining, working in a restaurant life that's just so glamorized. Like opening a restaurant in Paris just sounds like the ultimate dream. But little do most people know, he's barely making money. He doesn't have time to eat. He's like super underweight, chain smoking. And so he was just so ready for something new. And he was just ready to come on. And so he came on as our third co-founder. And this was September of 2017. So he moves back to the US. We get to work, and he's actually also from San Diego, which is where I'm from. And so he's just like in, his personal kitchen, iterating recipe after recipe. And we finally landed on something around January of 2018. So a couple months later. And then we ended up launching March of 2018. So like 2 months after that.
Wow, that is so cool to hear. And the serendipitous events that you're there on vacation and you were able to eventually meet your co-founder through that vacation. And was that really the launching pad for Oat Haus? And when did that brand, yeah, what was the branding like in the
Yeah.
early days? So you had a formula, you had a product from R&D that Ari was able to formulate. How did you bring it to market?
Well, what's funny looking back too is that was my first time ever meeting Ari. Like Eric had kind of told me about him from, like old summer camp stories, but it's just kind of crazy that it's worked out so well. I know a lot of founder drama happens, and that's why businesses fail most of the time is like, founder disagreements. But just meeting him for the first time and deciding to start a business together, things have actually, knock on wood, like been pretty seamless. So yeah, how do we bring it to market? That's a great question. And none of us, aside from Ari working in restaurants, but that's so different than CPG, as you know, like we never had experience starting any business, let alone a food company, let alone self-manufacturing. So I think we kind of just, number one, we're all really good at problem solving. If there's a problem, like we're going to find a solution. And if we don't know how to do it, we'll figure it out either talking to people in the industry, or honestly, just using the internet, Google. I wish we had ChatGPT at the time. That would have saved us a lot of headache. And we definitely have made like so many mistakes, which I'm happy to talk about. But so Ari moved back to San Diego, as I mentioned. We like kind of landed on our last iteration of the formula, which is so different, actually, as I mentioned, to what we're using today. But at the time, we were like, this is it. And, Eric and I were still living in San Francisco. So what was happening was we identified a commissary kitchen in San Diego, like a pay by the hour, small little space where we started to produce like our first early batches. And we just launched pre-orders on social media. So I had gained about 10,000 or so followers on my personal Instagram, just from sharing about my eating disorder recovery, sharing some recipes. And we were like, this is a perfect launch pad for, pre-orders. So Eric and I were flying down every weekend to San Diego to help Ari make the product. It's very labor intensive when you're making it in a Vitamix. And luckily we didn't get that many pre-orders. So we were not like really, you hear all those like magic stories where people are like, yeah, we just launched, we hit publish on our website and it blew up. Like we did not have that experience, just being totally transparent. So it was like my mom's friends, like very friends of friends. But I think what we did, we had that signal early on of like, at least like people on social media were excited, and there was just people got it. Cause I think when you're launching something new, it always sounds so sexy, right? When you're inventing something new. But what people don't realize is the customer education is actually a pain in the ass and is probably the biggest hindrance to growing quickly because people don't know what it is, obviously. I think where we did find this little magic sliver in this Venn diagram of, innovation and familiarity is you think of granola, you think of nut butter, peanut butter, like those are just Americana staples, right? So it wasn't like, yuzu, unique flavors. Like we were doing, vanilla, we are doing chocolate. And so I think we kept the flavors very original, very simple, and the product idea itself was unique. It really, granola butter, once you try it and once you see it, it kind of makes sense. So I think that worked to our advantage. But yeah, we launched pre-orders online and then, there wasn't anything sexy, there wasn't anything exciting in the early days that, you hear on like BuzzFeed articles. It really was just putting one foot in front of the other. We kept things D2C for the first year. And I actually was still working at Doximity. I was working in tech. Eric was working for Accenture for the first year and a half. So this was like a side hustle night and weekends because we were living in San Francisco. It is expensive to live in San Francisco. And, we weren't making any money with Oat Haus. And we actually didn't start paying ourselves until the third year of our business. So after I left my job in tech, I was still supporting myself because I had my personal Instagram. So I was doing some content creation and, people kind of like poo poo influencers and content creators. There's a lot of money in content creation, which I think people are starting to realize. So even though I only had like, 40 or 50,000 followers, I was making a decent income. And it was something that I was able to do while building Oat Haus. So it's always been kind of just like a scrappy piecemeal, how are we going to support ourselves, but stay financially, feeling cushioned a little bit. Because at least for me, every founder is different, but my creativity goes out the window when I feel any little bit stressed about kind of my bare like human necessities of maybe like how am I going to pay rent? So that's why it was important for me to keep my job as long as I could.
That is seriously such a breath of fresh air to hear that it wasn't an overnight success. And that's one of my biggest criticisms with all these entrepreneur content creators out there. They're like, oh, build a Shopify site in 30 minutes, launch it. I'm doing six figures overnight. I'm like, no, like that just doesn't happen. You almost never hear of overnight successes. So I really appreciate that honesty and transparency because that's really what founders and also consumers want to hear is that, here's a team of people that genuinely care and have iterated and problem solved and created products that the market ultimately wants. And you're able to really just provide a solution to the problem. So that's so cool to hear. And I'd love to touch a little bit on the founder led marketing because I think that's really key. And I'm a big believer of audience is really key. And if you have audience to lead with, that just sets you up for so many advantages. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the upsides. You mentioned a little bit about the upsides where it provided some early financial stability for you personally. Are there any downsides and also maybe any advice on how to balance founder led marketing?
Oh, yes, I love this question. So many downsides. I think 7 years in, I can definitely say with certainty I've seen both sides. And the reason, we have this like fancy marketing term for it now, right? Like founder led marketing. But at the time, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I just knew like the businesses I like following on social media are businesses where I can see humans behind them. Like I don't like supporting faceless organizations. And, I like following startups on social media because the founder is like sitting, in her garage packing orders. And I know that I'm supporting someone. I don't know, I feel that connection a lot more strongly. So, number one, I knew that was the type of presence I wanted to build with our business online. Um, and then secondly, that's just what I was good at. And that's what I was familiar with my personal Instagram and being kind of, influencer, content creator, whatever you want to call it. I know a lot of founders don't enjoy being front and center, and that is totally fine. Like I've talked to, Ashley at Mush, some other founder friends that are like, it's not for me. And I think they've built amazing businesses without doing that. So I don't think it's something you need to do. And I think actually people can feel when it's forced and they can feel when you don't want to be in front of the camera. And there are days where, I try to like time block and schedule, okay, today's my content creation day, but maybe I'm in my luteal phase and like I'm just hormonal or I didn't get a lot of sleep last night and like, and I force it. And then I like rewatch the content later. And I'm like, oh, you can tell like I did not want to be filming that video. So there's like this magic energy behind more qualitative content creation. And I think looking back, the pros have really been obviously the audience connection, people who have been with us since day one. Like, I would just pull out my camera in the early days. And when I would get in my car after a long day of production, sweating, crying, like, true blood, sweat, and tears, just being like, guys, this is so hard. And, it still is hard at this point of the business. It's just a different type of hard, a little less manual labor for me personally, but, I would say more stress in a different way. And I think people feel really connected to you as a founder, and connected to the business in general, and, really along for the journey, which is what I love. And I love feeling so tuned in to our audience. And, I answer all of our DMs on our Oat Haus account. And so, like, I really am directly talking to the customer and very plugged in. The con for me is I have very thin skin. And, you know, it's gotten thicker over the years, thankfully. People forget or they don't expect the founder to be truly responding to comments, responding to DMs, right? Oftentimes you'll have like a customer service person, which I probably should hire, to have a little bit of that buffer. And like TikTok is a scary place, like reading those comments. And so, like, one that pops out in my mind is on TikTok, someone had commented, "You're such a narcissist, like the founder of this company is such a narcissist. She's always the one in the content." And I actually used that as I like replied to that comment and I created this video about kind of like basically, why I'm in all of our content, right? And it's like, well, number one, I'm the one creating content because, we're not venture backed. So we don't have like a whole team of content creators. But number two, it's like I'm constantly sharing my story, not to make it about me, but when I was struggling with food, I never saw anyone talking about it so openly. And so I thought I was alone and I thought I was broken. And, the reason I share is to help other people feel less alone. You just can't take anything super personally, and you have to be so kind of laser focused and like constantly reminding yourself, if you're doing founder led stuff, your why and like why this is the path that you've chosen. Because I think when you do put yourself out there and the bigger that you get, as we've gotten bigger with Costco especially, you just open yourself up to more criticism. I think the hardest part as a founder is staying so true to that path, because you're going to get so much advice. And, if you follow all of the advice, it's going to be, not super beneficial for you because you're just going to be distracted all the time. Like, oh, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do that. So staying disciplined has been, I mean, I'm not perfect at it, of course, but I think that's probably the hardest con of being founder led, where if you're behind the scenes, you're not really dealing, maybe your customer service hire is dealing with that, or your social media manager, and then they come to you and there's just like that buffer. But zooming out, for us, it's a net positive. And I love connecting with our customer. And so overall, it is like 99% positive.
The internet really is such a weird place, and you have this almost faceless bullying essentially. There's no accountability if you leave a comment or send a DM or create this Reddit thread. It's completely anonymous, and that's one of the real downsides with the internet in general. So, first of all, super sorry that that happened to you, because any founder that's putting themselves out there, I'm like, that's vulnerability. Like, that's really hard to do, like physically to create that content, emotionally to actually put yourself out there. And I think it creates this different dynamic where you and your personality and your values become really tied to the brand, and where that distinction is drawn in the early days, sometimes there is no distinction. I've talked to a few artists and their brand is their personality, and to have that early on can be great for business. It could be a great launching pad, but also puts you personally in crosshairs, where if it's just a brand, you have that veil. Oh, they're criticizing the brand. That's not me. That's just a project I'm working on. But when it truly is founder led, you're out there, like you're
For
front and
sure.
center.
And as a founder, you're constantly getting criticized, even if you're not the face of the brand. And like in the early days, that was we were very, a lot of enmeshment and intertwined, things happening. And I've talked about this recently on my personal social, but like I'm not super interested in food anymore, and I'm really into fashion. I'm really into design, creating in another way. Like this whole topic of play and fun as an adult, like that is what I'm interested in lately, because I've evolved, shocker, 7 years after starting our business, I'm a different person. Like, who would have thought? And I just don't see a lot of founders talking about that, where, I'm not going to give up on my business, because obviously we're, just kind of at this precipice. We just launched in Costco, but I personally am not as passionate about food as I used to be. I still love food, but it's not my everything like it used to be. And I think a lot of that comes from healing my relationship with food too, because it's not this off limits thing anymore. So it's not so sexy and appealing. But because of that, it's like when people criticize our product, I'm like, okay. Also, once you get into a store like Costco or Target and someone doesn't like it, it just stings less. But like I said, there has been more criticism and opinions because you get on a bigger scale as well.
Those people are always going to be out there. And I think, like you said, you just got to roll with the punches. And when you are on a mass market, like Costco, for example, there's inevitably going to be people that are just sour or negative or having a bad day and they're taking it out on you or your product, which it's unfortunate, but I think that's kind of the role of
Yeah.
a founder is kind of just like eating it and you're like, all right,
All
like
right.
on to the next.
For sure.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear, like, was there a turning point with your personal storytelling, your personal brand, and being founder led where the concept of granola butter was starting to like really get traction and people were starting to understand it? You didn't necessarily have to explain every little step of it.
Hmm. It's funny you asked that because, like, truly, at least for me, and maybe I'm too in it to really realize this moment. I know people talk about, like, oh, maybe after we aired on Shark Tank, like, that's when things really took off. But it's never felt like this overnight success. It really has felt like one foot in front of the other, showing up when I didn't want to, having that discipline to just stay consistent and keep, I mean, I think we haven't missed a day of posting on social media since we launched the business 7 years ago. And it's just, people don't like that answer. Honestly, like they want the magic hack. They want the course that they can buy. And it's hard and it's just staying consistent. And you look at these businesses, I mean, even Poppy to me is an anomaly because their beverage, they're in a fast, high velocity category. I think they were in business for 7 or 8 years. And you see a lot of these companies where you think they're an overnight success, but they've been building for, close to 10 years. So I think if I could point to one thing, honestly, Costco, even though we just launched there, it has this effect that I've never seen with any other retailer. And I love all of our retailers. All of my children are equal, but Costco is really interesting, especially we were doing this road show, and so you're basically setting up like a farmer's market in a Costco and even at Whole Foods where I'm like, okay, usually people are shopping here if they have a little more expendable income, but we're priced at $9.99 at Whole Foods. And people will kind of be like, they'll taste it, like, oh, that's good, but like, I don't need it. And at Costco, we're $9.99 for a 27-ounce jar. And people are like, I like this. I'll take three. I'm like, what? They know they're getting a value. So I think they just maybe pay attention a little less to the price, I guess. Or maybe because it's a larger amount, they're like, it's harder to, rationalize, is this expensive for this size jar? I have no idea. But Costco is one of the most amazing businesses I've ever seen in the world, and it's just insanely packed every time, every day we were there. So, Costco has really been amazing, not just for the volume, but also because I mentioned I run our social media. I've noticed so many just discovery, so many people tagging us. Found pick this up at Costco, which I never would have guessed with like a big volume jar. You would think that with like single serving squeeze packets. I think Costco has been like the biggest for us so far.
The Costco effect is real. And I think when you're in Costco, it plays on that psychology of I'm getting the best possible price essentially out there, unless there's some Black Friday sale going on. But you're like,
You
I'm gonna
are.
buy it regardless. Yeah, like I don't care if it's, 5x the amount I need. I'm gonna buy it and I'll probably end up finishing over the next couple of weeks anyways and go and buy another one.
Yeah, no, you really are. Like now that I know how the back end works without divulging too much, everyone should be shopping at Costco. It's insane.
And you've mentioned Shark Tank a few times. I'd love to just gloss over it. How did that end up happening? And yeah, what was the result?
Yes. So yeah, Shark Tank, we applied. It was the third time we applied is when we finally got the call back. So a testament to, be consistent, be persistent, be a pit bull. So the first time Eric went, and I don't know if you met Eric at Expo West, but he's an engineer. He likes to be behind the scenes. He's not really, I don't know, he's not the most like razzle dazzle on camera. And so they didn't call us back after he went to like an open casting in San Francisco in person. Second time we did a video and we took it so seriously. Like we were like real business people, like applying on Shark Tank. And we were just so stiff on camera. Like I was rewatching that video the other day and I was like, oh, poor little babies. Like, what were we thinking? So the next time, the third time we applied, we were like, this is it. Like, now or never. We're just going to put it all out there and we're going to be like loud and proud. And if they think we're insane, fine. But like, they might also love it because it's television. And they ate it up and they loved it. Like, we were just in our facility. We were acting so silly, but it was like Ari was playing the ukulele in the background. Just there was just lots happening. It was like a fever dream, honestly. And they call us back and they like the video. We just went through the whole process, which is a pretty lengthy process. A couple months long, lots of interviews. And then we finally made it on and we flew to LA in July of 2021, and it was right after we rebranded. So previously, our brand was called Queen, and we had rebranded to Oat Haus. Perfect timing, just a couple days before we filmed, thank goodness. And it was a crazy experience. It was such a whirlwind. I'm so glad we did it. Like it was a great, learning experience and good exposure. But yeah, we didn't get a deal. I think in hindsight, if I were to give advice or if I were to do it again, our offer just like wasn't compelling enough because we were treating it too much like an actual investor pitch instead of a TV show. And so, we didn't want to offer like 50% of our company, kind of being dramatic here, but it's like, and then we would look bad to our actual investors who were watching the show, because like we had decent sales when we went on. And so we were kind of like, we don't really need the money. So I think we wanted like wanted to give up like 5% equity or something. And anything less than 10%, the sharks are kind of like glaze over, like this isn't that interesting to me, but they liked the product. So, I didn't think we were even going to air because the episode just wasn't that interesting, but they ended up airing us. So, yeah, so we aired. And what's interesting, speaking of Costco, is Costco actually reached out to us from seeing us on Shark Tank. And we were, it was 2021. We were nowhere near ready to go into Costco because you have to be SQF and have all the, manufacturing in place. And so, but it was our first connection point with them. So I guess in the end, it was a net positive. Every time we re-air, we see like a little bump in sales. So yeah, I think it's like a good experience, but I wouldn't say for anyone listening who's a founder, like banking on it to change your whole business. Like it could, but it also, could not.
Yeah, it sounds like a cool experience, but not necessarily something that is a must-have for a brand to be able to scale. And it's relatable. It's something that everyone knows.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it was like some of my aunts and uncles, it was like once we launched into Target, they didn't care. Shark Tank, okay. Allie's got a real business now. It's like, all right. So
That's hilarious.
yeah.
That's hilarious. And I would love to actually rewind just a little bit. And there's a question I always love to hear from CPG brands about your first retail door. What did that look like? What did you do? I have a feeling it took a lot of grit and determination to get in, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Oh yes. Our first like actual retailer was Erewhon, but our first like big retailer was Whole Foods. And the way that we got into Whole Foods, it's always a fun story with us. So we didn't use a broker because we were new to the food industry. I didn't know how all this worked. So what did I do? I went on LinkedIn. So I'm like, oh, the buyer is surely on LinkedIn. And so and we were living in San Diego at the time. So I'm like, oh, I'll look for the buyer who does like the San Diego, Southern California region. And I find a name, no email. So I'm like, all right, well, let me just try a few, like plug and play a few different email address options, because every company has a format. Maybe it's like first name dot last name. So I'm plugging and playing, bounce back, bounce back. Finally, I don't get a bounce back with this one. And I was like, And I wait a couple weeks and then she responds and she was like, oh, this is an interesting idea. Like, I'd love to try samples. I thought I had won the lottery. And it was like, little did I know, how much it takes to like get on shelves after that. But we sent samples again, like I think at this point, like months go by and I'm following up. And she finally responds and she's like, we love this product. We'd love to test it in the Southern Pacific region, like SOPAC region, which is Southern California, Arizona, Hawaii. It was 50 stores, which at the time we were like, we have made it. We're going to exit now. Thank you. And, we're so stoked. And then we're like, wait, how do you even do retail? How do we even do this? So it was just so much, figuring it out as we go. Like we didn't even know how to fill out the new item form. We had to like call someone else in the industry, and just like, can I buy you coffee? Can you like tell us how to fill this out? And yeah, so we were in Whole Foods, that one region, for about a year. So this was like 2019 we got in. about a year, and then they expanded us to 3 additional regions and they added another flavor. And what I want to mention with this is like for that year before they expanded us, I mentioned I did like our Whole Foods demos. Like not only would I do a demo like once in a while, I did two back to back every single day for weeks. So this is 8 hours of demoing a product on your feet, just people spitting out our product on the floor. Like, just, it was such a grind. And like, I say this because it's just no step of the process of growing our brand has been easy. Like, actually, at times I'm like, am I swimming upstream? Like, should I just like pivot and do something else? Because it feels so like, grindy. And so yeah, the whole year, and we crushed it in at least like the San Diego stores. Like those 3 stores, I'm like, if we don't do well here, like we don't have a business. But our numbers were so, so good. And I think just like social media helped with the other stores. Obviously, we couldn't be everywhere at once, but we did well enough that they wanted to expand us. And so, yeah, we've been with Whole Foods since 2019. I'm actually headed to their headquarters next week to pitch our granola. They just launched our single serving squeeze packets a couple days ago. So they've been a great partner for us. And we have 3 granola butter flavors with them now, and we're nationwide with them. But, hasn't been overnight. Like I said, we started in 2019.
I love the theme of just pure determination and just literally just slugging through it because I think that's what business is. Even when you're in Whole Foods, even when you're in Costco, there's things that are going to go wrong. And actually being able to support that store and you got on shelves, but then to actually get it off of shelves is arguably harder. So here you are working 40 hours in store, probably another 40 hours to support operations.
Yeah.
And that's really what it takes to actually get product into store and then off shelves into people's homes. And I'm a big believer that there's no magic bullet. So I love that you're just really telling it how it is. And I don't want this to be a negative thing for founders. I think that should just be honest and open about knowing what to expect mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually about what it takes to get any company off the ground, a CPG or a direct to consumer or a tech product. It's going to take a lot on your shoulders, and it's going to be times where you're going to have probably not great balance, probably not great mental health. Just know that it shall pass.
I probably should have, mentioned in the beginning, and I do have to be careful about not being too, not like cynical, but like too real, because I can probably scare some people away. But I guess the reason I am so real is because I never saw that when we were starting. And so I think there was a lot of naivete when we were starting of just, like entrepreneurship is so glamorous and you get to work for yourself. And it's like, then you end up working 24/7. And I guess I wish I like knew a little bit more of that. And, obviously I'm still doing it. I'm so passionate about like, our business and everything, but it's been a big wake up call, but it just tests you a whole new level. So yeah, so I like to just paint a very accurate picture of what it takes. I mean, honestly, it feels just like brute force so many days. And I know that people talk a lot about like, things aligning and manifestation. And like, I'm all for the woo woo, but a lot of times it does feel like pushing this business like up the hill. And if you stop pushing, it's going to fall back down on you. And like, not a lot of time for water breaks. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to know what to expect. Like the thing I hate the most is when I'm with a friend and they know we're going on a 10 or 15 mile hike and like, oh yeah, like we're going on a nice little walk down by the river. And I like,
Yeah.
don't bring a water bottle. And I'm like 7 miles in. I'm like, wait, so when are we over? They're like, oh yeah, we just got to go to the top of that 3,000 foot peak over there. I'm like, dude, like you should have just told me it was going to be 15 miles. I could have prepared a little bit more
For
for
sure.
that. So I think being honest is important. And I think it creates that contrast to what that entrepreneurship narrative on social media is currently being told, because that's a lie. Like that's not entrepreneurship. They're probably doing that to sell you some course to make themselves seem like the next, Jeff Bezos of marketing or whatever. It's like, no, like it takes pure determination. It takes sacrifice. Yeah. And would you say that retail right now is the majority of business for you, or is D2C still an important channel?
Yes, retail is so it switched. I would say it flip-flopped when we launched Target. So we launched Target 2022 or 2023, and we used to be, majority D2C. And then, the real volume is obviously with retail, especially with our category. People always think we're a lot bigger than we are because we do have a lot of distribution. But the thing is, our category is not it's not beverage, right? So it's like, how often are you buying a spread when you go to the grocery store? Maybe once a month if you're like really going through it. Usually it's like once every 2 months. So that's why we launched granola. That's why we're like starting to launch, we will be starting to launch some of these other categories that are just got a little more zip to them, got a little more energy. Because our category is very sleepy, which is great. It's how we've been able to disrupt and innovate because no one really wanted to enter it because it wasn't that exciting. But yeah, so like we have a lot of distribution and retail is definitely the majority, but I think I'm excited to enter retail with, some other categories too. And not to say D2C is dead for us, like it definitely plays a big role in, we still do like the limited flavor drops, and it's just really beneficial for cash flow. Cause like Costco, for example, we had to put out 600K of ingredients, and then you don't see that back until, you get your check, and that's a couple months later. So oftentimes people actually really struggle with Costco, and we had to raise a little bit of money before we launched Costco to be able to, keep that bank account padded.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually, you led with my next question of how you supported that operationally, like launching into, Whole Foods, and how do you actually create the product and like enough product to get into, that whole region. That's a pretty big region.
For sure. For Whole Foods or for Costco?
Yeah, I would say for any of them, like
For any.
as you grow, yeah, Costco, Target,
Yeah.
Whole Foods.
I mean, I think anytime, with like Whole Foods at the time felt massive. Costco for us right now feels massive. And because we self manufacture, it's always really hard when you are scaling. People think growth is so exciting, and it is, but it also is really challenging. So like with Costco, we had to add a night shift and hire like a night shift manager. And so, we added a bunch to our manufacturing team. So I think now our manufacturing team is like close to 25 people, and that's high, a lot of overhead, a lot of, salaries. It's a balance. And I think cash flow, especially for Costco, was important. So we raised, 400K or so just to like pad that, but we try not to overinvest, and we try to grow in like a steady way. But, when you get into a store like Whole Foods or Costco, sometimes you just need to, it feels like a rocket ship, momentarily. So luckily with Costco, we were able to automate shortly before we got in there, at least with like our filling machine. So that helped a lot. And now we're at a place automation wise, operations wise, where, once we start launching into other regions of Costco, it's going to be really easy for us to make a lot more product just from adding a couple hours at night with this night shift. So we don't have to like break everything down and clean it. So yeah, long story short, it's always a little bit challenging with the initial growth period, but it's kind of like ripping off a band-aid, and it's what you would have needed to do. It just like condenses that.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of push or pull. It's a chicken or the egg when it comes to cash flow. You need the cash to be able to make the product, but you need the product to be able to get into the retail store. So that makes sense. And Allie, this is gonna be the last question, and I'll
Yeah.
let you run. If you were to give your past self a piece of advice based on everything you know now, is there one piece of advice you give yourself?
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's such a hard question. All of the answers, this is going to be kind of like sentimental, but like all of the answers are within you, like within me, because I think oftentimes, when you're younger, especially, like I was always looking for the answer outside of myself, whether it be with my relationship with food or, the business, or I just feel like as I've gotten more mature, I really have realized that no one knows what they're doing. I'm like, wait, no one knows what they're doing behind the scenes at these businesses. So, like, really, instead of focusing all of your energy and thinking that everyone else is the expert, like, you are actually the expert, and like really cultivating that inner voice, your intuition. Like, I've never regretted following my intuition, but I have regretted so many times listening to someone else give me advice and tell me exactly what I need to do. So, yeah, so listening to your gut, that's probably what I would say.
That was Allie Bonar, the founder and CEO of Oat Haus. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to click the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode. If you're looking for more practical takeaways to grow your brand, subscribe to the Brand Study newsletter. It's packed with exclusive content, deep brand analysis, and real world insights you can actually use. Sign up at thebrandstudy.co. I'm Conrad, and I'll see you next time.